Gentlemen, welcome back. This is the last video I have for Chunk 4. I hope that you're all progressing well as I enjoy Thailand and the beach and the nicer or finer things in life. So the last thing we left off in the last video, you should have completed the factors that contribute to the business decline, picked a case study, and either done our good friends BlackBerry, which are actually up on the classroom just to your right, left with the purple sign that says business studies. There's a good article there. And then you've also got the case study in there, which is Kathmandu. A little bit of a closure for something we did a little bit earlier. Now, let's move to the next point, which is the next syllabus dot point, if this wants to finally click over. It's cessation. So this is the last bit. Now, the most clear point of what we need to learn about cessation being the word or defined word to end or to cease, not Caesar, but to cease. So there is voluntary and involuntary. Now, I know you all might laugh and say death maybe is not voluntary. However, if a business owner was to retire, change their lifestyle, in other words, say I no longer want to run a business, or they fail due to unmanageable debt, that is voluntary cessation. So in other words, the debt's got too high, they've approached and said, I no longer want to be in business, and have closed their business, or they've died, the owner ceases to operate their business on their own accord. There's also involuntary, which means that you are forced by creditors or those people that are external to the business that you owe money to close your business. Now, involuntary cessation is quite a serious business. If anyone works in insolvency, all right, or has a parent or sibling or anyone else that works in that, they'll know a little bit more about it. They're commonly referred to as the chop shop, where a business goes to die and be chopped up into pieces and sold off. Okay, but that's where they've been forced to by creditors because they're worried about getting their money back. It's important for you, gentlemen, to know the difference between voluntary and involuntary, and I invite you to get this down into your notes. Here are our key terms and definition. If you'd like to and you like key terms, I'd invite you to get them down now. However, we're about to go through them all in a little bit of depth, but still, they're pretty good points to have down. The last one being solvent versus insolvent. It's something I'm going to test you on in the Kahoot when I get back. So I'd invite you to know the difference between what is solvent and what is insolvent. I'll do a spot quiz when I get back. It's there in the textbook. Now, let's look at the first point of cessation, which is, bankruptcy. Now, this can only happen to who? Well, this is where our knowledge of the four types of business comes back in, being sole traders, partnerships, private companies, and public companies. Now, legal structures bankruptcy can happen to have to be partnerships or sole traders. Okay? So sole traders and partnerships can become bankrupt. So in other words, if you're an individual, you can't be put into liquidation. All right? As much as there's probably people that should like to or would like to be put into liquidation, they cannot be. They can only become what's called bankrupt. Now, once again, they can either come into this voluntary and involuntary. So you can voluntarily place yourself in bankruptcy, or it's involuntary. So voluntary being that your death, you choose to, of your own volition, enter into a bankruptcy claim, or involuntary being your creditors and those that you owe money think they're never going to get paid back their money. It's better to wind you up and place you in bankruptcy to get their money. Now, I'd like you to, this is the task here in red, write out a step-by-step process of how bankruptcy goes through. It is available there for you in the textbook in terms of page 106. There's a step-by-step process in terms of what it goes through, and there's the final thing of include the term realization. So if you look at figure 4, the information under 4.43, you'll have your task process. See if you can break it down to a 1, 2, 3 step. It's pretty easy. Now, bankruptcy is pretty serious, okay? You may be sued by creditors for non-payment. In other words, you're running a Hank and Chief store in Stitchu. You're not paying back your suppliers, not paying them back. And then eventually they have non-payment. They go to the courts, placed through litigation. You're unable to pay. You're ordered by the court to pay your debts. You state to the court you're unable. And then the creditors petition the court for bankruptcy so that your assets and everything that you own in your personal name, sole trader or partnership, remember, because you're on the line and it's unlimited liability, is on the chopping block to be sold off. Okay? It's not an easy process. It's pretty expensive to go through the courts. All right? Having done this before in a previous lifetime, it's not an easy process to apply bankruptcy and get it done through the courts. Now, we move to voluntary administration. In voluntary administration happens to the businesses on the other side. So we said the legal structures before, being the types was sole trader and partnership. This is obviously going to be private and public company. They go through what's called VA, or voluntary administration, where an administrator, or someone who's a CA or an investigator, or a liquidator is sometimes what they're referred to, or receiver, gets appointed. Okay? Their sole role is that you almost become the quarterback of this disaster of watching the business implode. You bring all the creditors together in sometimes like an AGM or GM type meeting room. You basically flesh out the financial situation of the business, and you literally pose to the creditors one or two things. One, could you please give us a little bit more time? We'll pay you back. Look, the business is not such a bad situation. They've got good products. Give them a bit of time, maybe lower your interest rates on loans or write off a little bit of debt, or it could be just accept that you're not going to get paid for the next 12 months, and then the 12 months after that we'll be back in the black and doing okay and be able to pay you back. If it's unsuccessful, you go to the chop shop, all right? That's where the business essentially goes into liquidation, which is the next step. Not bankruptcy, because bankruptcy can only happen to individuals. It goes into liquidation. I'm about to go into that in more depth in the next slide. Now, what I'd like you to do is read 107 and 108 in your textbook, being liquidation, and there's a few points there. What I'd like you to do is to read through it in depth, and then want you to define both liquidation and receivership. Okay, the two are different. Okay, liquidation is commonly referred to the winding up of the company, whereas receivership is where someone is appointed. So you can be in receivership as a company and get out of it, whereas liquidation, that's your death knell. You're never getting out of it. Okay. So that's almost your distinguish. I'd like you to have that in your notes though, because it's an important thing. I'd also like you to outline liquidator's main function, having read 107 to 8. And then the keynote, which is not in the textbook, but it's important. Creditor, if a big company like BHP or Commonwealth Bank went under first, creditors are paid before shareholders. Typically the government's paid first, in which case the ATO, Australian Taxation Office. Then your banks, who are your listed creditors, then all your other creditors, then shareholders. So if you hear those stories of Enron, the big collapse, just hit YouTube and write ENRON collapse, and you'll get the stories and those sad stories about it. Shareholders get back like 1 cent in the dollar from what they invest in the company, basically because a lot of money needs to go to the government and unpaid taxes. You then got all your banks that have a mortgage over the business or something of that nature. You then have registered creditors who have registered, and then unregistered creditors, for example, suppliers of tables, chairs, maybe a phone line to Enron, who are still yet to be paid. At the end of that list, it's a very long list of people to be paid. You then have shareholders. It's why shareholders often don't get a return on the money that they gave to the company. Now, the two types of insolvent liquidators, there's creditors, which is voluntary, and the court, which is involuntary. Now, the order in which they're paid, so this is what I was going to one step back, and creditors are paid first. This is your order. Liquidators' fees, employees' wages and superannuation, employee leave entitlements, employee retrenchment pay, unsecured creditors. Now, in between liquidators' fees, or at the top there, is actually the Australian Taxation Office. They always get paid first, or the Taxation Office. Then the liquidators' fees. In other words, the people that get appointed to chop up this company actually pay themselves fees, and they get paid before anyone else, or after the government, obviously. But then there's employee wage and superannuation, leave entitlements, employee retrenchment. Because it should be that employees, and you've worked for the company, you should get the pay that you're entitled to. You then have creditors. So in other words, there's a lot of pigs at the trough to be fed before your shareholders get money back. Now, these are the problems for stakeholders, okay? when a company goes into liquidation. And it's important to get this into your notes. All right? For company directors, well, these are the various stakeholders, which we've done at the end of chunk 3. Company directors can lose a job, might lose some of their personal assets or have a bill to pay, or they could face fine or imprisonment, which is the case for one poor sod being investment banker during the GFC in USA. You also have creditors. They might not receive all their money. Employees losing their job. Shareholders, you're unlikely to receive a return on your investment. And society economy, there is less wealth creation or less production, which means you have less options, which means that obviously price of things go up, or you might be losing your job, and therefore it can lose to economic confidence, which was the case during the GFC, and people were generally fearful of investing in companies for fear of not getting their money or money back or being able to get a job. What I'd like you to do is copy out your syllabus dot point your book, which is identify problems that arise to stakeholders when companies go into liquidation. What I want you to do is read this article and watch this YouTube one on Dick Smith. And then what I want you to do is write out what happened to company directors, creditors, employees, shareholders, and society economy. The answers are pretty much those, but I want you to apply it into a case study scenario. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This might be important for you. Gentlemen, thank you for your attention and working through these. The last thing I'd like you to do as revision, which will probably be that I'm returning now on the Wednesday, is answer the questions on 109, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10 through 12. Thank you for your efforts and for listening into these. I hope that these were beneficial. If you have any questions, please feel free to hit the social links on Lampada, and I'll answer them as best I can when I can. Well done, gentlemen. Thank you.